Welcome to this explainer. Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. You feel totally trapped in this cycle of working super hard, putting in hours and hours of effort, but getting almost zero results. It's an incredibly frustrating place to be, and honestly, if you're tuning into this, you've probably been there. Well, today we are going to unpack exactly why that happens, but more importantly, we're going to look at how to actually fix it by biologically working with your brain's natural wiring instead of against it. We're talking about a massive shift here, moving from a brute force approach to a strategic, scientifically backed method that respects how human memory actually works.
So let me ask you a question directly. Have you ever spent, 3 hours straight just highlighting a textbook? You know the feeling. Just sitting there late at night, completely exhausted, aggressively turning a $100 textbook into a neon yellow coloring book. You feel like you're just spinning your wheels, despite caring so much about doing well. You put in the time, you sacrifice your evenings, you chug the coffee, but deep down, it feels like you're getting absolutely nowhere. It's almost like you're performing the act of studying without actually doing the studying.
You do all that meticulous highlighting, only to snap that heavy book shut and realize, wait, I can't remember a single solitary thing I just read. It is a terrible, defeating feeling. But the truth is, we often trap ourselves in this specific cycle for a very biological reason. See, we stay busy with passive tasks like coloring pages with a highlighter because our brain actually craves the immediate dopamine hit of completing a physical task. It feels incredibly productive to mark up a page. It keeps that nagging guilt of procrastination at bay. But there's a massive difference between being busy and being effective. And right now, your brain is just getting the dopamine without the actual learning.
All right, to see where things are going wrong, we need to take a step back. I'm actually going to slow down for a second here. I want to ask you 5 really revealing questions to help you diagnose your own study habits. Now, don't overthink these, okay? Just feel your immediate response. Number 1, do you actually understand the material, or have you just become familiar with seeing the words on the page? Second, if I took away your notes right now, could you explain what you just studied to a 5-year-old? That's way harder than it sounds, isn't it? Third, are you studying because you're actually making progress, or are you just trying to survive the next 12 hours until the test is over? Fourth, do you intentionally avoid testing yourself while studying because you're secretly terrified of seeing what you don't know? And fifth, deep down, when the frustration peaks, do you believe you're just not smart enough to be a top student? Take a breath. If those questions made you feel a little exposed right now, well, that's actually a very good thing. It means we found the friction points. Because here is the absolute most crucial thing you are going to hear in this entire explainer. It is not your fault. Seriously. If you answered yes to those questions, you haven't been failing because you lack some magical genius gene. You've been failing because you were taught a broken system. You've been using these outdated industrial-era memorization tactics in a modern learning environment. Think about it. Throughout your entire academic life, you were given an endless list of what to learn, but no one ever actually sat you down and taught you how your brain works. It is time to stop blaming your own intelligence for a fundamentally flawed approach. So what's the fix? Well, the ultimate solution to this broken system can be found in a framework from the book How to Study Like a Genius by Shadow Books. This framework, which includes this really brilliant 7-day reset plan, literally rewires how you approach your desk every single morning. We're going to dive into the core concepts from this exact book right now to answer those 5 painful questions we just went through. By the end of this, the goal is to completely transform you from a passive reader who just kind of hopes the information sticks into an active learner doing what biologically actually works. Let's kick things off by dismantling that first myth, the familiarity trap. Rereading your notes over and over is arguably one of the biggest traps you can fall into. Why? Because it tricks your brain into a false sense of safety. You read a sentence for the 4th time, your brain recognizes the words, and it sends a signal saying, yep, I know this. But here's the catch. Mere recognition is not recall. Then exam reality hits. The second you're sitting in a quiet room under the pressure of a blank test page without your notes to prompt you, that superficial recognition instantly disappears. You're left staring at the ceiling, trying to pull from a memory that was never actually formed in the first place.
Okay, so what about that second question? Can you explain it to a 5-year-old? Well, our brains can only process tiny pieces of information at a single time, which cognitive scientists refer to as chunks. If you cannot explain a complex concept in extremely simple words without relying on your notes, it means your chunk is too big. Your brain is literally choking on the information. True understanding means breaking a massive, complex chapter down into one core premise, and then building outward. Think of it exactly like learning a phone number. You don't memorize a string of 10 random digits all at once. You group them into smaller, digestible chunks. If you can't chunk your study material simply, you haven't learned it yet.
Moving on to the third issue, studying to actually make progress versus just trying to survive. When you study in survival mode, meaning you're anxious, you're exhausted, and you're just desperately trying to get through the night, your attention narrows to a tiny pinpoint. Under this kind of high stress and emotional pressure, your brain floods with cortisol. And here is the fascinating yet totally brutal biological reality. Cortisol literally shuts down the memory formation centers in your hippocampus. It blocks the physical pathways needed to store new information. You're putting in the hours, you're staring at the screen, but biologically, your brain has completely closed the door. No way around it.
Which brings us to point number 4, how we handle testing. Why do we avoid it? Well, because it's deeply uncomfortable, right? But we have to completely reframe this discomfort. Struggle is actually the sign that learning is happening. Think of it exactly like going to the gym. If you lift a weight that requires absolutely zero effort, your muscles aren't going to grow. If studying feels easy and comfortable, you are likely not building any long-term memory at all. You have to actively embrace the mental friction of testing yourself, failing, and trying again to make the information actually stick.
And that leads right into that heavy, nagging belief that maybe you just aren't smart enough. Let's just destroy that myth right now. Genius isn't a natural talent. Genius is a method. Smart students aren't naturally superior, they just utilize better systems. They use techniques like active recall, which basically means forcing your brain to retrieve information from scratch without looking at the answer, and spaced repetition, which involves reviewing that newly learned information at increasing intervals over time, right before you're about to forget it. It's an engineered, reproducible method. It is not magic. So let's see how this all builds together into a deep psychological truth. We often default to the passive illusion of studying, like our old buddy the neon highlighter, because it's safe. We become addicted to the feeling of being productive rather than the reality of being effective. We must forcefully trade that in for active struggle. Every single time you try to remember a complex formula or historical concept, and it feels incredibly hard, like you are physically reaching into the back of your brain, that mental struggle is not a failure. That is your brain making new neural connections and literally getting stronger in real time.
You are absolutely capable of being a genius-level learner. You really are. You just need to stop fighting your brain and start working with it using these active systems. Which leads me to leave you with this final kind of provocative thought to chew on. If you could learn any subject in half the time by applying these exact methods, what would you do with all those extra hours you'd win back? What is that dream hobby, that side project, or that personal goal you'd finally dive into? Think about your true potential when you finally have the right tools in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.